Chapter 1. The Storm That Changed Everything. The storm had been raging for 3 days. Arya pressed her face against the frost-covered window of the mountain cabin, watching snow whip through the darkness like angry spirits. Each gust of wind made the old wooden structure groan, and she pulled her threadbare sweater tighter around her shoulders. The fire in the hearth had died hours ago. She'd burned the last of the split wood yesterday. 3 more days, she reminded herself. 3 more days and the storm will pass. Then I can make it to the next town. The thought felt hollow. She'd been running for 2 months now, ever since she'd discovered the truth about her stepfather's business associates. The memory of that night still made her hands shake, walking into his study to find him counting stacks of blood money while planning to sell her to settle his gambling debts. The men he'd made promises to weren't the kind who accepted refunds. A crash outside made her jump. Something heavy had hit the cabin's outer wall, followed by a sound that made her blood freeze. A low, pained whimper that was almost human, but not quite. Arya's heart hammered as she grabbed the poker from beside the dead fireplace. Another sound came, weaker this time. Definitely an animal and definitely hurt. "Don't go out there," her rational mind screamed. "You don't know what's out there." Bears, wolves, worse. But the whimpering came again, and something deep in her chest twisted. She knew what it felt like to be hurt and alone in the cold. She knew what it felt like when no one came to help. Before she could second-guess herself, Arya pulled on her boots and coat, grabbed the emergency flashlight, and stepped into the howling storm. The wind hit her like a physical blow, nearly knocking her backward. Snow stung her face as she fought her way around the side of the cabin, following the sounds of distress. Her flashlight beam cut weakly through the blizzard, until it landed on something that made her gasp. A massive wolf lay crumpled against the cabin's foundation, dark fur matted with blood and snow. It was easily the largest wolf she'd ever seen. Even injured and lying on its side, it was nearly as long as she was tall. Its breathing came in shallow pants, and she could see a deep gash along its flank. The wolf's eyes opened as her light found it, and Arya's breath caught. They were the most unusual color she'd ever seen. Pale gold with flecks of green, almost human in their intelligence. For a moment, they stared at each other through the storm, predator and prey suspended in a strange moment of understanding. Then the wolf's eyes fluttered closed, and its breathing grew even more labored. "Oh God," Arya whispered. The animal was dying. Every survival instinct told her to go back inside, lock the door, and wait for nature to take its course. Wild wolves were dangerous even when healthy, and this one was massive enough to tear her apart without effort. But those eyes, there had been something so achingly familiar in them. A loneliness that matched her own. "I'm going to help you," she found herself saying, though the wolf probably couldn't hear her over the wind. "I don't know how, but I'm going to try." Getting the wolf inside nearly killed them both. Even unconscious, it was dead weight. Easily 200 pounds of muscle and fur. Arya had to fashion a makeshift sled from a tarp she'd found in the cabin's storage closet, then drag the animal inch by agonizing inch through the snow. By the time she managed to haul it through the doorway, she was sobbing with exhaustion and cold. Her hands were numb, her coat soaked through, and she was pretty sure she'd pulled something in her back. But the wolf was inside, and that was what mattered. She built up the fire with furniture legs. She broke off an old chair, grateful for the warmth as it spread through the room. In the flickering light, she could see the wolf's wounds more clearly. The gash along its side was deep but clean, probably from falling against something sharp during the storm. There were smaller cuts and scrapes, but nothing that looked infected. Arya had never treated an injured animal before, but she'd patched up enough of her own wounds over the years. She boiled water in a pot over the fire, tore up one of her spare shirts for bandages, and got to work. The wolf stirred as she began cleaning the wounds, those strange gold-green eyes opening to fix on her face. She expected it to snap at her, to try to get away, but it just watched her with an intensity that made her hands tremble slightly. "Easy," she murmured, the same tone she'd used to calm frightened horses at the stable where she'd worked as a teenager. "I'm trying to help. I know it hurts, but you're going to be okay." The wolf made a sound that was almost like a sigh, and some of the tension went out of its massive frame. As if it understood her, as if it trusted her. It took her 3 hours to clean and bandage all the wounds. By the time she finished, the storm outside had quieted to a steady snowfall, and exhaustion was hitting her in waves. The wolf had drifted back into unconsciousness, its breathing deeper and more regular now. Arya curled up on the old couch across the room, wrapping herself in a moth-eaten blanket. She should probably sleep in the bedroom and put a closed door between herself and the wild animal. But something made her want to stay close, to make sure it kept breathing through the night. As she drifted off to sleep, she could have sworn she heard the wolf whisper, "Thank you." But that was impossible. Wolves couldn't speak. Could they? When Arya woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows and the cabin was filled with an unusual warmth. For a moment, she couldn't remember why her back ached or why there were bloody rags scattered around the fireplace. Then she turned her head and froze. Where the injured wolf had been lying, there was now a man. He was unconscious, lying on his side in exactly the same position the wolf had been in. Dark hair fell across a face that was all sharp angles and strong lines, high cheekbones, a square jaw, lips that looked like they rarely smiled. His skin was olive-toned and marked with what looked like ritual scars along his chest and arms. The bandages she'd applied to the wolf's wounds were somehow perfectly positioned on his very human torso. And he was completely, magnificently naked. Arya's face burned as she forced herself to look away, her mind racing. This was impossible. People didn't just turn into wolves. Wolves didn't just turn into people. She was hallucinating. The stress of the last few months had finally broken her completely. A low groan made her look back despite herself. The man's eyes were opening, the same pale gold with flecks of green she remembered from the wolf. He blinked slowly, then his gaze found her face. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then he tried to sit up, winced, and looked down at the bandages covering his wounds. When he looked at her again, there was something ancient and weary in his expression. "You saved me," he said, and his voice was exactly as she'd imagined it would sound, deep and rough, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. Arya's voice came out as a croak. She cleared her throat and tried again. "You were a wolf. You were definitely a wolf." He studied her for a long moment, as if trying to decide something. Then he sighed and ran a hand through his dark hair. "Yes," he said simply. "I was." Chapter 2. Dangerous Truths. The simple admission hit her like a physical blow. Part of her had been hoping for denial, for some rational explanation that would let her cling to her understanding of how the world worked. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Many things are possible that humans don't understand," he replied, and there was something infinitely sad in his voice. "The question is what you plan to do with that knowledge." Arya stared at him, her mind reeling. She should be screaming. She should be running. She should be doing anything except sitting here having a calm conversation with a man who claimed to turn into a wolf. Instead, she found herself saying, "You're hurt. You shouldn't be sitting up." Something flickered in his strange eyes. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude. "You're not afraid of me." "I should be," she admitted. "But you were dying in the snow, and I couldn't just leave you there. Wolf or whatever you are." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to solve a puzzle. "My name is Kieran," he said finally, "and I owe you my life." "Arya." She gestured toward his bandages. "Let me check those wounds. They were pretty deep. You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "I didn't drag your furry ass through a blizzard just to watch you bleed to death on my floor." That actually got a small smile from him, the first she'd seen. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and far less intimidating. "Your floor?" Heat crept up her neck. "I mean, it's not my cabin. I'm just staying here until the storm passes." "Running from something?" The question was asked gently, without judgment, but it still made her tense. "Aren't we all?" She deflected, moving closer to examine his bandages. Kieran caught her wrist as she reached for the tape holding the gauze in place. His skin was fever-warm against hers, and she could feel calluses on his fingertips, the hands of someone accustomed to physical work. "Arya." Her name sounded different in his voice, like something precious. "If you're in danger, I need to know. My presence here might make things worse for you." "Worse how?" His grip tightened slightly. "My people. We have enemies, and right now, they're hunting me." The words sent a chill down her spine. "What kind of enemies?" "The kind that kill anyone who gets in their way." His golden eyes were serious, almost urgent. "The kind that would hurt an innocent human just to get to me." Arya looked down at his hand on her wrist, then back up at his face. She should tell him to leave. She should run in the opposite direction as fast as her legs could carry her. She'd spent the last 2 months avoiding dangerous men, and here she was, voluntarily tending to someone who admitted his enemies would kill her without a second thought. But something in his expression stopped her. Beneath the warning, she could see genuine concern for her safety. And something else. A bone-deep loneliness that matched her own. "Let me worry about my own safety," she said quietly, gently pulling her wrist free. "Right now, you're the one who's hurt." Kieran searched her face for another moment, then lay back down with a frustrated sigh. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both." Arya carefully peeled back the tape and gauze, relieved to see that the wounds were already beginning to heal. The edges had knitted together more in one night than should have been possible in a week. "How do you heal so fast?" "Shifter metabolism. We heal quickly, but severe injuries can still be fatal if left untreated." He watched her work with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "You have gentle hands." "I've had practice patching up injuries." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "Your own?" Arya's hands stilled. She hadn't meant to reveal that much. "Sometimes." "Someone hurt you." It wasn't a question. She focused on cleaning the partially healed wound, not meeting his eyes. "The world hurts everyone eventually." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting." She applied fresh gauze with perhaps more force than necessary. "There. That should hold until tomorrow." Kieran was quiet while she worked on the smaller cuts and scrapes, but she could feel him watching her. When she finished, he caught her hand again. "Thank you," he said seriously. "Not just for the medical care, for treating me like a person instead of a monster." "Are you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "A monster, I mean." His smile was sad. "Most of my kind would say yes. Most humans definitely would." "What do you say?" Kieran was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I say I've done things that keep me awake at night, things I can never undo or make right. But I'm trying to be better than what I was made to be." There was so much pain in those words that Arya's chest ached in sympathy. She found herself reaching out to touch his face, tracing the line of a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. "We all have things we regret," she said softly. "Things we wish we could change. That doesn't make us monsters. It makes us human." "I'm not human." "Maybe not technically, but you have a human heart. I can see it in your eyes." Kieran turned his face into her palm, and she felt him tremble slightly at the contact. "You don't know me, Arya. You don't know what I've done." "No," she agreed. "But I know you let me tend your wounds instead of ripping my throat out. I know you're more concerned about my safety than your own. And I know that whatever you've done, you're not proud of it. That has to count for something." He closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked so young and vulnerable that her heart clenched. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." "Then tell me." Kieran's eyes opened, meeting hers with startling intensity. "My father is the alpha of the largest pack in North America. For 28 years, he's been grooming me to take over when he steps down. To be the kind of leader he is, ruthless, violent, willing to do anything to maintain power." Arya's hand was still cupping his face, and she didn't pull away. "But you don't want that." "I thought I did. For years, I followed his orders without question. I enforced his rules, punished those who defied him, eliminated threats to pack security." His voice was flat, emotionless, but she could see the self-loathing in his eyes. "I was everything he wanted me to be." "What changed?" 3 weeks ago, he ordered me to execute a family of rogues who'd been living peacefully on the edge of our territory. Their only crime was refusing to submit to pack authority." Kieran's jaw clenched. "The parents I could have understood. But their children, the youngest was barely 5 years old." Arya's breath caught. "You couldn't do it." "I tried to convince him there was another way, that we could relocate them, give them a chance to find somewhere else to live." Kieran's laugh was bitter. "He said I was weak, that a true alpha never shows mercy to those who defy him." "So you refused?" "I helped them escape instead. Got them to the border of another pack's territory where they'd be safe." He met her eyes. "My father considers that the highest form of betrayal. He's sent hunters after me to bring me back for execution." The pieces clicked into place. "That's why you were injured. You were running. I was ambushed 2 days ago. Managed to escape, but barely." Kieran's expression darkened. "They won't stop coming. And now that I've involved you—" "You didn't involve me," Arya said firmly. "I chose to help you. That's on me, not you. You don't understand. If they find me here, they'll assume you're working with me. They'll kill you just to send a message." Arya was quiet for a moment, processing this information. She should be terrified. She should be pushing him out the door and barricading herself inside. Instead, she found herself asking, "How long do we have?" "We?" "You're not going anywhere until those wounds heal properly. So how long until your father's people find us?" Kieran stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. "Arya, you need to leave. Now. Before what? Before I get a chance to help someone who actually deserves it for once?" She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "Do you have any idea what my life has been like for the past 2 months? Running from men who want to use me, hurt me, sell me like I'm property. Finally, I meet someone who's running from something actually worth running from, someone who's trying to do the right thing, and you want me to abandon you? To save your life, yes." Arya turned back to face him, and there must have been something fierce in her expression, because he fell silent. "Let me make something very clear, Kieran. I've been taking care of myself since I was 15 years old. I've survived things that would break most people. And I'm not about to let your father's thugs scare me away from the first decent person I've met in years. You barely know me. I know enough. She crossed her arms. Besides, where exactly would I go? I don't have a car. There's 3 feet of snow outside, and the nearest town is 20 miles away. We're stuck here together whether you like it or not. Kieran was quiet for a long moment, and she could practically see him wrestling with the decision. Finally, he sighed in defeat. One day, he said, my injuries should be healed enough by tomorrow night that I can travel. After that, I leave, and you go in the opposite direction. Fine. Arya moved back toward the couch. One day. But that means you need to rest and let your body heal. You're incredibly stubborn, Kieran observed, but there was fondness in his voice. So, I've been told. She settled back onto the couch, pulling the blanket over her legs. Get some sleep. I'll keep watch. Arya. Sleep, Kieran. That's an order. He chuckled softly. Yes, ma'am. As she watched him drift off to sleep, Arya couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken another dramatic turn. But for the first time in months, she wasn't running toward an uncertain future alone. She was running toward it with someone worth saving. Chapter 3. Heat and Healing. Arya woke to the sound of Kieran pacing the small cabin like a caged animal. You should be resting, she mumbled, squinting against the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. He turned at the sound of her voice, and she was struck again by how magnificent he was. The bandages were gone. Apparently, his wounds had healed completely during the night. His naked chest was unmarked except for the ritual scars she'd noticed before, and his golden eyes held a restless energy that made her pulse quicken. I can't rest, he said, running both hands through his dark hair. The full moon is tomorrow night. So? Kieran stopped pacing and looked at her intently. So I need to be far away from here before then. Far away from you. There was something in his voice, a note of desperate concern that made her sit up straighter. Why? What happens during the full moon? I lose control. The words came out flat, matter of fact. All shifters do, to some extent. But alphas, we're different, stronger, more dangerous. I could hurt you without meaning to. Arya stood up, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders like a shield. Define lose control. The wolf takes over completely. Instinct overrides rational thought. During the full moon, we're not really human anymore. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. I won't risk your safety. But you'll risk your own? Those hunters are still out there, Kieran. If they find you alone and vulnerable, better me than you. The simple statement hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Arya studied his face, noting the tension in his jaw, the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. There's something else, she said. It wasn't a question. Kieran's silence was answer enough. Tell me. It doesn't matter. I'll be gone before... Kieran. She stepped closer, and she could see him tense as she invaded his personal space. Tell me. He closed his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was barely audible. You're my mate. The words hit her like a physical blow. You're what? Mate. Life partner. The one person in the world who's meant to be mine. His eyes opened, and the raw longing in them made her breath catch. I knew the moment I smelled you in the storm. And tomorrow night, during the full moon, that knowledge is going to drive me completely insane. Arya stared at him, trying to process this information. Mate, she repeated slowly. Like, wolves mate for life? Among other things. Kieran's voice was strained. The mating bond is sacred among our kind. When we find our true mate, everything changes. Our wolf won't rest until the bond is complete. Complete how? Heat flashed in Kieran's eyes, and Arya felt an answering warmth low in her belly. I think you can figure that out. Her cheeks burned. Oh, Yeah. Oh! Kieran resumed his pacing, moving like he was fighting against invisible restraints. So, you can see why I need to leave. Tonight, while I can still think clearly enough to walk away. What if I don't want you to walk away? The words slipped out before she could stop them, and Kieran froze mid-step. When he turned to look at her, his expression was a mixture of hope and disbelief. You don't know what you're saying, don't I? Arya let the blanket fall from her shoulders, standing before him in just her thin sweater and leggings. I'm 25 years old, Kieran. I know what I want. You want a monster who could tear you apart during a moment of lost control? I want you. The admission felt like stepping off a cliff, but she couldn't take it back now. Didn't want to take it back. I've never felt anything like this before. This connection between us. It's like I've been waiting my whole life for you to walk into it. Kieran's control visibly cracked. One moment he was across the room. The next he was right in front of her, his hands framing her face with desperate gentleness. Arya, he breathed, her name like a prayer on his lips. Kiss me, she whispered. He hesitated for a heartbeat, and then his mouth was on hers, and the world exploded into sensation. The kiss was everything she'd never known she was missing. Desperate and tender, claiming and giving, fierce enough to steal her breath and gentle enough to make her heart ache. His lips were warm and firm, moving against hers with a skill that made her knees weak. When his tongue traced the seam of her mouth, she opened for him with a soft moan, and he growled low in his throat. The sound sent liquid heat shooting through her veins. She pressed closer, her hands fisting in his hair, and felt him shudder against her. Arya. He pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. We can't. You don't understand what you're asking. Then show me. She looked up into his golden eyes, seeing her own desire reflected there. Help me understand. Kieran's control snapped. He lifted her against him, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, gasping at the feel of his hard body pressed against hers. His mouth found her throat, and he placed open-mouthed kisses along the sensitive skin there, making her arch and moan. You smell so good, he murmured against her neck. Like wildflowers and rain. It's been driving me insane since the moment I woke up. His teeth grazed her pulse point, and she cried out, her nails digging into his shoulders. The small pain seemed to snap him back to reality, and he carried her to the couch, settling her on his lap without breaking their kiss. Tell me to stop, he said against her lips. Tell me to walk away before I make this impossible for both of us. Instead of answering, Arya pulled her sweater over her head and tossed it aside. Kieran's eyes went wide, taking in the sight of her in just her simple cotton bra. You're so beautiful, he said reverently, his hands skimming up her ribcage. So perfect. I'm not perfect, she whispered. I'm damaged, broken. Then we match. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. Because I'm broken too. But maybe we can be broken together. The tenderness in his voice undid her completely. She kissed him again, pouring everything she couldn't say into the press of her lips against his. He responded with equal fervor, his hands tangling in her long hair. They lost track of time, lost in each other. Kieran mapped every inch of her skin with his hands and mouth, worshipping her like she was something sacred. Arya had never felt so cherished, so desired, so completely safe with another person. When he finally pulled back, they were both shaking with want and emotion. I should go, he said, but his arms tightened around her even as he said it. Stay. Arya pressed her face into the curve of his neck, breathing in his wild masculine scent. One more night, please. The moon won't rise until tomorrow. We have tonight. She pulled back to look at him, letting him see the truth in her eyes. I trust you. You shouldn't. But I do. She pressed a soft kiss to his jaw. I trust you with my life, Kieran. With my heart. He closed his eyes and she could see him wrestling with himself. When he opened them again, there was resolution there, and something that looked like love. One night, he said quietly. But if I start to lose control, you won't. Arya settled more comfortably against him, feeling his body relax slightly. Tell me about your world. About what it means to be a shifter. So he did. As the sun set outside the cabin windows, Kieran told her about pack hierarchy and territorial disputes. About the difference between born shifters and those who were bitten. About the ancient laws that governed their society. Most humans who learn about us don't survive the knowledge, he admitted, as full darkness fell outside. It's not safe for your kind to know our secrets. But I'm not most humans, am I? Arya traced patterns on his chest, marveling at the way his muscles jumped under her touch. I'm your mate. Yes. The word was soft but certain. My mate. My heart. My salvation. What does that mean, exactly? Being mated? Kieran was quiet for a moment. It means you're mine, and I'm yours, in every way that matters. It means I would die before letting anyone hurt you. It means that your happiness is more important to me than my own life. That sounds overwhelming? Terrifying, she admitted. But also, right. Like something I've been searching for without knowing it. Kieran's arms tightened around her. The mating bond isn't something that can be forced or faked. It either exists or it doesn't. And with us, he trailed off, pressing his face into her hair. With us? With us, it's stronger than anything I've ever felt before. Stronger than anything I thought was possible. Arya lifted her head to look at him, seeing the truth written in his expression. I love you, she said simply. The words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, he just stared at her in wonder. I love you too, he whispered finally. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. They made love slowly, tenderly, as if they had all the time in the world instead of just one stolen night. Kieran was incredibly gentle, treating her like she was made of spun glass. And Arya felt tears slip down her cheeks at the sheer beauty of being loved by him. Afterward, they lay entwined on the narrow couch, her head on his chest, his fingers combing through her hair. I have to leave tomorrow, he said quietly, before the moon rises. I know. Arya's voice was muffled against his skin. Come with me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Kieran, I know it's asking a lot. I know you'd be giving up your human life, probably forever. But I can't bear the thought of leaving you here alone. Not when those men are still hunting you. Arya was quiet for a long moment, considering. Where would we go? Anywhere. Everywhere. There are packs all over the world who would welcome us if we proved our intentions were peaceful. His hand stilled in her hair. Or we could live as rogues, just the two of us, making our own rules. And your father's hunters? They'll keep coming, but they'll have a harder time tracking us if we keep moving. Kieran's voice hardened. And if they do find us, they'll have to go through me to get to you. That's not exactly reassuring. I'll keep you safe, Arya. I swear on my life. She believed him. Against all logic and reason, she believed him completely. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Arya lifted her head to look at him, seeing her own emotions reflected in his golden eyes. Okay. I'll come with you. The smile that spread across Kieran's face was like sunrise after the longest night. He rolled them over so she was beneath him, and kissed her with such tenderness that she felt her heart overflow with love. "You won't regret this," he promised against her lips. "I know," she said, and meant it. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, but Arya felt safer than she had in years. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Chapter 4. The hunt begins. The howls started just before dawn. Arya jerked awake to find Kieran already on his feet, every muscle in his body tense with alertness. The sound came again, a long, mournful call that seemed to echo from all directions at once. "They've found us," Kieran said grimly, pulling on the clothes she'd scrounged from the cabin's lost and found box. "We need to go. Now." "How many?" Arya asked, throwing her few belongings into her backpack with practiced efficiency. "At least 3. Maybe more." Kieran moved to the window, peering through the curtains. "They're surrounding us, trying to cut off escape routes." Another howl answered the first, closer this time. Arya's blood ran cold at the sound. There was something wrong with it, something that spoke of malice and barely controlled violence. "What's the plan?" she asked, slinging her pack over her shoulders. Kieran turned from the window, and she was struck by the change in him. Gone was the gentle man who'd held her through the night. In his place stood something harder, more dangerous, an alpha preparing for battle. "You run," he said simply. "Head east toward the road. Don't stop. Don't look back. Don't try to help me if things go badly." "Like hell." Arya crossed her arms, glaring at him. "We're in this together, remember?" "Arya, these aren't just hunters. They're my father's elite guard. Killers who've never failed to complete a mission." Kieran's jaw was tight with barely controlled emotion. "I won't watch them tear you apart. And I won't watch them take you back to be executed." She moved closer, placing her hands on his chest. "There has to be another way." Before Kieran could respond, a new voice cut through the morning air. Deep and commanding, with an authority that made the hair on the back of Arya's neck stand up. "Kieran, I know you're in there, boy. Come out and face me like the alpha you claim to be." Kieran went rigid. "Marcus," he breathed, and there was something like fear in his voice. "Who's Marcus?" "My father's beta, his most trusted enforcer." Kieran's hands clenched into fists. "If he's here personally, it means my father wants to make an example of me." The voice came again, closer now. "You have 60 seconds to show yourself, or we start burning buildings until we flush you out." "They wouldn't," Arya whispered. "They would." Kieran moved toward the door, and Arya grabbed his arm. "Don't. It's suicide. It's the only way to keep you safe." He cupped her face in his hands, and she could see the pain in his eyes. "I love you, Arya. Remember that, no matter what happens next." Before she could protest, he was gone, slipping out the front door into the gray dawn light. Arya pressed herself against the window, watching in horror as Kieran walked into what was clearly a trap. 4 massive wolves emerged from the tree line, circling him with predatory grace. The largest, a silver-gray beast with scars across its muzzle, positioned itself directly in front of him. The wolf shimmered, its form blurring and reshaping until a man stood in its place. Tall, broad-shouldered, with iron-gray hair and cold blue eyes that held no mercy. "Marcus," Kieran said, his voice steady despite the danger surrounding him. "Pup." Marcus's smile was all teeth. "Your father is very disappointed in you. I'm sure he is. Helping rogues escape, defying direct orders, abandoning your responsibilities to the pack." Marcus began to circle Kieran like a shark scenting blood. "He sent me to bring you home for judgment. And if I refuse, then I execute you here and now, as is my right as beta." Marcus's expression didn't change. Your choice. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched the confrontation unfold. She could see the other wolves, still in their shifted forms, tightening their circle, cutting off any chance of escape. There's a third option, Kieran said quietly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Oh? Trial by combat. 1-on-1. Winner takes all. The beta's laugh was harsh. You want to challenge me? Boy, I was killing enemies before you learned to shift. Maybe, but I'm not the scared pup you remember. Kieran's voice carried a new edge, something wild and dangerous. I'm an alpha in my own right now, and I claim the right of single combat. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying Kieran with calculating eyes. Very well, he said finally. But when I win, the human dies with you. What human? Kieran's voice was carefully neutral, but Arya could see the tension in his shoulders. Please. Your scent is all over this place, and hers is all over you. Marcus's smile turned predatory. Did you really think we wouldn't notice? The great Alpha Prince, rutting with a human like some common rogue. Rage flashed across Kieran's face, and for a moment, Arya glimpsed the beast lurking just beneath his human exterior. Leave her out of this, he growled. I'm afraid that's impossible. She knows our secrets now. Pack law is clear about what happens to humans who learn too much. She's my mate. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Arya saw Marcus's eyes widen slightly. Your mate? The beta laughed. But there was less certainty in it now. A human? Your father will be even more disappointed than I thought. My father doesn't get to choose my mate, Kieran said firmly. The moon goddess does, and she chose Arya. Then the moon goddess has a sense of humor. Marcus gestured to his companions, and they began to shift, taking human form. Because you're both going to die today. Not if I win. You won't. Marcus began to strip off his clothes with efficient movements. But I'll give you points for trying. Arya watched in fascination and terror as both men prepared for combat. Their bodies began to change, muscles rippling and expanding, bones cracking and reshaping. Within moments, two massive wolves faced each other in the clearing, Kieran's dark fur gleaming like obsidian, Marcus's silver coat marked with battle scars. They circled each other slowly, testing for weaknesses. Marcus was larger and clearly more experienced, but Kieran moved with a fluid grace that spoke of deadly potential. The first attack came without warning. Marcus lunged forward, jaws snapping at Kieran's throat. Kieran twisted aside at the last second, his own teeth finding purchase on the beta's shoulder. They rolled across the snow-covered ground, a blur of fur and fangs and primal fury. Blood stained the white ground beneath them as they fought with a savagery that made Arya's stomach turn. Marcus was ruthless, using every dirty trick in the book. But Kieran was faster, and he fought with the desperation of a man protecting everything he loved. The battle seemed to last forever, but it was probably only minutes before Kieran managed to get his jaws around Marcus's throat. The beta went still, recognizing defeat. For a moment, the clearing was silent except for their harsh breathing. Then Marcus spoke, his voice distorted by his shifted form, but still understandable. Kill me then, pup. Prove you're as ruthless as your father. Kieran held the position for a long moment, and Arya could see him wrestling with the decision. Finally, he released his grip and stepped back, shifting back to human form. I'm not him, he said quietly. I'm not you. I don't kill unnecessarily. Marcus shifted back as well, one hand pressed to his torn throat. You should have, he said, because now I know your weakness. Before Kieran could react, Marcus whistled sharply. The other hunters immediately moved toward the cabin, and Arya realized with horror that she'd been spotted. No! Kieran started to run toward her. But Marcus tackled him from behind. "You want to save your little human?" The beta snarled. "Then come home with me willingly. Submit to your father's judgment. Maybe he'll let her live." Arya didn't wait to hear Kieran's response. She grabbed the emergency flare gun from the cabin's survival kit and burst through the front door. "Back off!" she shouted, pointing the weapon at the nearest hunter. The 3 wolves froze, clearly not expecting resistance from a human. "Arya, no!" Kieran struggled against Marcus's hold. "Run!" "Not without you." She kept the flare gun trained on the hunters, even though her hands were shaking. "Let him go, or I start shooting." Marcus laughed. "You think a flare gun will stop us?" "No," Arya said, shifting her aim slightly. "But it'll hurt like hell and probably scar. How do you think your alpha will react when you come home marked by a human?" The threat hit home. Werewolf pride was legendary, and being injured by a human would be a humiliation none of them could live down. "Clever little human," Marcus said approvingly. "But you're still outnumbered." "Maybe. But Kieran won your combat trial. By your own laws, that means we're free to go." The trial was interrupted. "By you." Arya's voice was steady despite her fear. "You attacked after he'd already won. That makes you an oath-breaker." She could see the uncertainty in the hunters' faces. Pack law was sacred among shifters, and violating it carried severe consequences. Marcus's expression darkened. "You know nothing about our laws, human." "I know enough." Arya took a step closer to Kieran, never lowering the flare gun. "And I know that if you break your word here, it'll get back to the other packs. How long do you think your authority will last when everyone knows you can't be trusted?" For a moment, the standoff continued. Then Marcus released Kieran with obvious reluctance. "This isn't over," he warned. "Your father will send others, stronger hunters, and eventually we'll find you both." "Let him try," Kieran said, moving to stand beside Arya. His arms slipped around her waist, and she could feel him trembling with adrenaline. "We'll be ready." Marcus and his hunters began to shift back to wolf form, preparing to leave. But as they reached the tree line, the beta turned back. "Enjoy your human while you can, pup," he called. "When we catch you, and we will catch you, I'm going to tear her throat out while you watch. That's a promise." Then they were gone, disappearing into the forest like shadows. Arya waited until she couldn't hear them anymore before lowering the flare gun. Her legs gave out, and she sank to her knees in the snow, reaction setting in. "That was incredibly stupid," Kieran said, kneeling beside her and pulling her into his arms. "It worked, didn't it?" "This time. But Marcus was right about one thing. They'll keep coming. And next time, they won't bother with challenges or trials." Arya looked up at him, seeing the fear and love warring in his expression. "Then we'd better make sure there isn't a next time." "What do you mean?" She stood up, brushing snow off her knees. "I mean it's time to stop running and start fighting back." Chapter 5. Alliance of Rogues. 3 days later, they were deep in the Montana wilderness, following a trail that Kieran swore would lead them to safety. "Tell me again why we're trusting someone called the Ghost," Arya said, stepping carefully over a fallen log. "Because he's the only alpha in North America who's successfully defied my father and lived to tell about it," Kieran replied, scanning the forest around them with constant vigilance. "If anyone can help us, it's him. And if he decides we're a threat, then we're probably dead." Kieran's honesty was both refreshing and terrifying. But it's still better odds than we'd have on our own. They'd been traveling mostly at night, sleeping in abandoned cabins or caves during the day. Kieran's injuries had healed completely, but Arya could see the toll that constant alertness was taking on him. He barely slept, starting at every sound, his wolf instincts keeping him perpetually on edge. How much further? She asked, noting the way the shadows were lengthening. Not far. His territory starts at the ridge. Kieran pointed toward a steep hill covered in pine trees. But Arya, when we meet him, let me do the talking. Rogue alphas aren't known for their patience with humans. As if summoned by his words, a low growl echoed from the trees ahead of them. Kieran immediately stepped in front of Arya, his body tense and ready for a fight. Easy, a voice called from the shadows. No need for violence. Yet. A man emerged from behind a massive pine tree, and Arya's breath caught. He was tall and lean, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes the color of winter ice. But it was the aura of barely contained power radiating from him that made her instinctively step closer to Kieran. "You must be Kieran Blackthorn," the man said, his gaze moving between them with predatory interest. "Son of the great Alpha Magnus. I've heard interesting things about you." "And you're Garrett Kane," Kieran replied carefully. "The ghost." "Some call me that." Kane's smile held no warmth. "Though I prefer to think of myself as a man who values his independence. We need your help. So I gathered from the rather dramatic message you left at my border." Kane began to circle them slowly, and Arya was reminded uncomfortably of Marcus's tactics. "Tell me, young Alpha, what makes you think I'd risk my pack's safety for a rogue and his human pet?" Kieran's growl was low and dangerous. "Watch how you speak about my mate." "Ah." Kane stopped circling, genuine interest flickering in his cold eyes. "Mate? Is it? Not just a human you're entertaining yourself with." "She's my true mate," Kieran said firmly. "Chosen by the moon goddess herself." Kane studied Arya for a long moment, and she forced herself to meet his gaze without flinching. Whatever test this was, she wasn't going to fail it. "Interesting," he murmured finally. "And what do you think about all this, little human? Ready to give up your nice, safe human life for a world of monsters and blood?" "I gave that up the moment I chose him over my own safety," Arya replied evenly. "And I've seen monsters before. Most of them were human." That actually got a laugh from the rogue Alpha. "I like her," he told Kieran. "She's got spine. Your father must be livid." "My father wants us both dead." "Of course he does. Magnus has never been one to tolerate defiance, especially from his own bloodline." Kane gestured for them to follow him deeper into the forest. "Come, we have much to discuss, and I'd rather do it somewhere more secure." They walked for another hour before reaching Kane's stronghold, a collection of cabins built into the side of a cliff, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. The place was clearly designed for defense, with multiple escape routes and concealed watchposts. "Welcome to Haven," Kane said as they climbed a narrow trail toward the main building. "Home to rogues, outcasts, and anyone else who's tired of bowing to pack politics." The main cabin was larger than it had appeared from below, with a great room dominated by a massive stone fireplace. Several people were gathered around the fire, men and women of various ages, all with the distinctive aura of shifters. "Pack meeting," Kane announced as they entered. "We have guests." The assembled shifters turned to study Kieran and Arya with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. Arya counted at least 8 of them, ranging from a woman who couldn't be more than 20 to a grizzled man with silver hair and scars crisscrossing his arms. "This is Kieran Blackthorn and his mate, Arya," Kane continued. "They're seeking sanctuary from Alpha Magnus." A collective murmur went through the group at the mention of Magnus's name. "Blackthorn?" The scarred man stood up, his expression hostile. "As in Magnus Blackthorn, the bastard who destroyed my pack?" "That's enough, David," Kane said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. The sins of the father don't automatically pass to the son, don't they? David's gaze fixed on Kieran with obvious hatred. How many of us has this pup hunted? How many of our people has he killed in service to his precious daddy? Kieran's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny the accusation. Too many, he said quietly. I've done things I'm not proud of. Things I can never make right. All I can do is try to be better. Pretty words, sneered a woman with short red hair. But why should we trust the heir to the most vicious pack in North America? Because he gave up everything to save a family of innocents, Arya said, stepping forward despite Kieran's restraining hand on her arm. Because he chose mercy over power, and justice over loyalty to his father. And because he's risking his life to protect me, even though keeping me safe makes him a target. A human defending a blackthorn. David laughed bitterly. I've seen everything now. You want proof of his character? Arya's voice rose with anger. He could have let Marcus execute me 3 days ago. All he had to do was walk away and pretend I didn't exist. Instead, he fought for me. He chose me over his own safety, over his own life. That's the kind of man he is. And what kind of woman are you? The red-haired woman asked. What makes a human think she's worthy of an alpha? The question stung, touching on insecurities Arya had been trying to suppress. I don't know, she admitted. I'm not special. I'm not powerful. I can't shift or fight or do any of the things that would make me useful to a pack. All I can do is love him with everything I have, and try to be worthy of the love he gives me in return. Her honesty seemed to surprise them. The hostility in the room lessened slightly, replaced by thoughtful consideration. The human has courage, observed an elderly woman sitting near the fire, and she speaks truth. The mating bond cannot be faked or forced. Thank you, Elena, Kane said respectfully. What's your counsel? The old woman studied Kieran and Arya for a long moment. There is something different about these two, she said finally. A strength that comes from true partnership. I sense no deception in either of them. That's good enough for me, Kane declared. Anyone who opposes giving them sanctuary can speak now or hold their peace. David looked like he wanted to object, but the rest of the pack remained silent. Good. It's settled then. Kane turned back to Kieran and Arya. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, but I want something in return. What? Kieran asked warily. Information. Your father's plans, his weaknesses, the location of his strongholds. Everything you know that might help us protect ourselves from his inevitable retaliation. Kieran hesitated. That would make me a traitor to my birth pack. You became a traitor the moment you defied him, Kane pointed out. The question is whether you're going to use that knowledge to help innocent people survive, or let your misplaced loyalty get more families killed. The words hit home. Arya could see Kieran wrestling with the decision, torn between his ingrained loyalty and his newfound moral compass. I'll tell you what you need to know, he said finally. But I won't help you plan offensive strikes against pack members who are just following orders. Most of them are good people trapped in a bad situation. Fair enough. Kane extended his hand. Welcome to the Resistance, Kieran Blackthorn. As they shook hands, Arya felt a surge of hope for the first time in days. They had allies now. They weren't alone anymore. But as she looked around at the faces surrounding them, scarred, weary, but determined, she realized that their real fight was just beginning. Chapter 6. Bonds of Trust. The next few weeks fell into a routine that was both comforting and strange. Arya found herself accepted into the pack's daily life with surprising ease. Elena, the elderly woman who'd spoken for them, took her under her wing, teaching her about shifter culture and the complex politics that governed their world. Your mate is more important than you realize, Elena said one afternoon as they prepared lunch for the pack. Magnus has been grooming him to take over for 28 years. His defection represents a massive loss of face for the Blackthorn pack. Which makes us bigger targets, Arya observed, chopping vegetables with practiced efficiency. Yes, but it also makes Kieran more valuable to our cause. Elena's ancient eyes were shrewd. He knows things about Magnus's operations that could help us save lives. Arya glanced across the common room to where Kieran was huddled with Kane and several other pack members, poring over maps and discussing strategy. She could see the toll it was taking on him, sharing his father's secrets, violating everything he'd been taught about pack loyalty. It's hard for him, she said quietly. Of course it is. He's been indoctrinated since birth to believe that loyalty to family trumps everything else. Elena's expression softened, but he's learning that there's a difference between family and blood. Real family doesn't ask you to sacrifice your soul for their approval. That evening, Arya found Kieran sitting alone on the cliff overlook, staring out at the valley below. She settled beside him, not speaking, just offering her presence. I keep thinking about them, he said finally. The pack members who are still loyal to my father. Good people who believe they're doing the right thing by following his orders. You can't save everyone, Kieran. Can't I? He turned to look at her, and she could see the pain in his golden eyes. What if there was another way? What if instead of running and hiding, we tried to change things from within? You tried that. Your father made it clear that mercy is seen as weakness in his world. But what if he's not the real problem? What if it's the system itself? Kieran's voice grew more animated as he worked through the idea. The way alphas are chosen based on strength instead of wisdom. The way rogues are automatically seen as threats. The way humans are treated as lesser beings. Arya could see where his thoughts were leading, and it terrified her. You're talking about revolution. I'm talking about evolution. About becoming something better than what we've always been. That's a beautiful dream, Kieran. But dreams like that get people killed. Sometimes death is preferable to living in a world where might makes right, and compassion is seen as weakness. He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. I know I'm asking a lot. I know this isn't the quiet life you probably imagined when you agreed to come with me. Arya laughed softly. Quiet life? Have you forgotten that I was running from human monsters when you found me? My life was never going to be quiet, with or without you. But this is different. This is bigger. Yes, it is. She turned to face him fully. And that's exactly why I want to be part of it. For the first time in my life, I have a chance to fight for something that really matters. To help create a world where people like that family you saved won't have to live in fear. Kieran's expression was a mixture of love and terror. If we do this, if we really try to change things, there's no going back. We'll be making enemies of every traditional pack in North America. We're already enemies of the most powerful pack in North America, Arya pointed out. How much worse can it get? You'd be surprised. Despite the gravity of their conversation, Arya found herself smiling. Are you trying to scare me away? Yes. Is it working? Not even a little bit. She leaned in to kiss him softly. I told you before, I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you decide to do, we do it together. The kiss deepened, and for a moment, all the political complications faded away. There was just the two of them, bound together by something stronger than pack law or blood loyalty. When they finally broke apart, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he whispered. I love your courage, your stubbornness, your refusal to back down from impossible odds. I love you too. All of you. The Alpha, the Protector, The man who's brave enough to dream of changing the world. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Finally, Kieran spoke again. I want to call a gathering. A gathering? Representatives from every rogue pack in North America. Maybe some from Canada and Mexico too. His voice grew stronger as the plan took shape. We'll propose an alliance. A new kind of pack structure based on cooperation instead of dominance. You think they'll listen? Some will. Others won't. But even if we only convince a few packs to join us, it'll be a start. Arya considered this. Cain will help. His people respect him, and he has contacts throughout the rogue community. What about you? Are you ready to become the mate of a revolutionary? She grinned. I thought I already was. The next morning, Kieran presented his proposal to Cain's pack. The response was mixed. Some were enthusiastic about the possibility of uniting the rogues, while others worried about painting an even bigger target on their backs. It's ambitious, Cain said when Kieran finished laying out his vision. Maybe too ambitious. All the best ideas start out seeming impossible, Elena observed. The question is whether we're brave enough to try. If we do this, there's no half measures, warned David, the scarred man who'd been most hostile to Kieran's arrival. Magnus won't just send hunters after us. He'll bring his whole pack to war. Then we'd better make sure we're ready for war, Kieran replied steadily. The debate continued for hours, but eventually, the pack voted to support Kieran's plan. Cain would use his contacts to arrange the gathering, while Kieran would spend the next few weeks preparing his presentation. As the meeting broke up, Elena approached Arya. You know what this means, don't you? The old woman asked quietly. War? Change. Real, lasting change, if we're successful. But that means you'll be more than just an alpha's mate. You'll be a symbol, a human who stands as an equal among shifters. The weight of that responsibility settled on Arya's shoulders like a heavy cloak. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. None of us ever are. But readiness isn't what makes someone a leader. Willingness is. That night, as Arya lay in Kieran's arms in their small cabin, she found herself thinking about Elena's words. What if I'm not strong enough? She whispered into the darkness. Strong enough for what? Kieran's voice was drowsy but alert. To be what they need me to be. The human who stands with the alphas. The symbol of change. Kieran's arms tightened around her. You're the woman who saved a dying wolf in a blizzard without knowing if it would try to kill her. You're the woman who faced down trained killers with nothing but a flare gun and sheer determination. If that's not strength, I don't know what is. That was just survival instinct. No, love. That was courage. And courage is exactly what this world needs more of. As Arya drifted off to sleep, she found herself thinking about the future they were trying to build. A world where strength was measured in compassion instead of violence. Where different species could coexist as equals. Where love could triumph over fear and prejudice. It was a beautiful dream. Now they just had to make it real. Chapter 7. The Gathering Storm. The gathering was set to take place in 3 weeks, at a neutral location deep in the Canadian wilderness. In the meantime, Cain's pack had become a hub of activity as messages were sent, alliances were negotiated, and preparations were made. Arya found herself thrust into a role she'd never imagined, serving as a bridge between the human and shifter worlds, helping Kieran craft arguments that would appeal to alphas who'd spent their lives viewing humans as inferior. The key is showing them that humans aren't just victims or resources, she explained as they worked on his speech. We're potential allies. We have skills and knowledge that could benefit shifter society. Such as? Technology, for one thing. Most packs avoid modern conveniences, which puts them at a disadvantage in a connected world. Medicine, Human doctors could help shifters who are injured beyond their natural healing abilities. Politics. We understand how human governments work, which could be valuable for packs trying to navigate legal challenges. Kieran nodded thoughtfully. But how do I convince alphas who've spent centuries believing in their own superiority that they have something to learn from humans? By showing them that superiority is an illusion, that we all have strengths and weaknesses, and that we're stronger together than apart. Their strategy sessions were interrupted one evening by urgent news from Kane's scouts. Blackthorn forces are moving north, reported a young woman named Sarah. 3 war parties, at least 40 shifters total. They're heading straight for our territory. Kane's expression darkened. How long do we have? 2 days, maybe 3 if they stop to scout. That's not enough time to evacuate, David said grimly. And there's nowhere to run anyway. They'll track us wherever we go. Then we make our stand here, Kane decided. This is our home. We defend it. Kieran stood up, his face pale but determined. No. This is my fault. I'll go to them. Negotiate. They're not here to negotiate, Kane interrupted. They're here to make an example of what happens to those who defy Magnus Blackthorn. Then let me give them what they want. Me. Absolutely not, Arya said firmly, grabbing his arm. We've been through this before. I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself. Arya's right, Elena added. Besides, they won't be satisfied with just you anymore. Your father's pride has been wounded too deeply. He'll want blood from all of us. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Weapons were checked and sharpened, defensive positions were established, and evacuation routes were planned for the non-combatants. Arya found herself assigned to the medical team, helping Elena set up a field hospital in one of the more secure cabins. I've never treated battle wounds before, she admitted as they stocked supplies. You'll learn quickly, Elena said grimly. Unfortunately, you'll have plenty of opportunities. As night fell on the second day, Kane's scouts reported that the Blackthorn forces had made camp just outside their territory. The attack would come with the dawn. Kieran spent the evening moving among the defenders, offering encouragement and tactical advice. Arya watched him with a mixture of pride and fear. He was a natural leader, inspiring confidence in fighters who had every reason to be terrified. He's impressive, Kane said, joining her at the window of the medical cabin. I can see why Magnus wanted him as an heir. He's going to be a great alpha someday, Arya replied. When he has a pack worth leading. He has one now. Look around you. Every person here is willing to die for what he represents. Before Arya could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. One of the sentries was running toward the main cabin, panic written across his face. They're coming, he shouted. They're attacking early. The sounds of battle erupted from the forest. Howls of rage and pain, the crash of bodies colliding, the terrible sounds of violence in the darkness. So much for waiting for dawn, Kane muttered, grabbing his weapons. Elena, get ready for casualties. This is going to be bad. He ran out into the chaos, leaving Arya and Elena to wait in terrified anticipation for the wounded to start arriving. They didn't have to wait long. The first casualty was Sarah, the young scout who'd brought news of the approaching army. She'd taken a massive bite to her shoulder, and she was losing blood fast. Pressure here, Elena instructed, guiding Arya's hands to the wound. Don't let go, no matter what. As Arya worked to stop the bleeding, she could hear the battle raging outside. The sound of Kieran's voice rose above the chaos, barking orders, rallying the defenders, engaging enemies with deadly efficiency. Please let him be safe, she prayed silently. Please don't let me lose him now. More wounded arrived, David with claw marks across his back, a young man whose name she didn't know with a broken arm, an older woman with blood streaming from her scalp. Elena moved between them with professional calm, triaging injuries and directing treatment. Arya tried to follow her lead, pushing down her fear and focusing on the task at hand. Then Cain stumbled through the door, supporting a figure that made Arya's heart stop. Kieran was unconscious, his shirt soaked with blood, his breathing shallow and labored. "What happened?" Arya demanded, helping Cain get him onto one of the makeshift beds. "Marcus," Cain said grimly. He was targeting Kieran specifically, trying to take him alive. Kieran wouldn't go quietly. Elena was already examining Kieran's wounds, her expression growing more concerned by the moment. "This is bad. Very bad. He's lost too much blood, and the wounds aren't healing properly." "What do you mean they're not healing?" Arya asked, fighting panic. "Something's wrong. Shifters heal quickly, but these cuts are staying open. It's like..." Elena's eyes widened in horrification. Silver. The weapons were coated with silver. Arya's blood turned to ice. She'd heard enough shifter lore to know what that meant. Silver poisoning could be fatal, especially for wounds this severe. "Can you save him?" "I don't know. The silver needs to be purged from his system, but I've never dealt with poisoning this extensive." Outside, the sounds of battle were dying down. Either the defenders had won, or there was no one left to fight. "Do whatever you have to do," Arya said fiercely. "I'm not losing him. Not now, not ever." Elena nodded grimly and began gathering supplies. As she worked, Arya held Kieran's hand, willing him to fight, to hold on, to come back to her. The door burst open and Marcus strode in, flanked by 2 other Blackthorn warriors. His clothes were torn and bloody, but he was very much alive and victorious. "Well, well," he said, surveying the scene with satisfaction. "The prodigal son, brought low at last." "Get out!" Arya snarled, moving protectively between Marcus and Kieran's unconscious form. "I don't think so, human. You see, I have orders to bring young Kieran home. Alive if possible, but I'm not too concerned about the details. He's dying. The silver will wear off eventually. Probably." Marcus's smile was cold. "Your precious mate is coming home with me, one way or another. Over my dead body. That can be arranged." Marcus stepped forward. But before he could reach Kieran's bed, Elena moved between them. "You will not touch him," the old woman said quietly, but there was steel in her voice. "Move aside, elder. This doesn't concern you." "Everything that happens to this pack concerns me, and I say he stays here." Marcus laughed. "You think I'm afraid of an old woman?" "You should be." Elena's eyes began to glow with an inner light, and the air around her shimmered with power. "I am Elena Morningstar, last of the Moon-Touched, and you are in my territory now." The change in Marcus was immediate. The arrogant confidence drained from his face, replaced by something that looked like fear. "That's impossible," he whispered. "The Moon-Touched are extinct." "Mostly," Elena agreed. "But not entirely. And what remains is more than enough to deal with you." She raised her hand, and Marcus was flung backward by an invisible force, slamming into the cabin wall hard enough to crack the wood. "You have 60 seconds to leave my territory," Elena said conversationally. "After that, I stop being polite." Marcus struggled to his feet, his face a mask of rage and frustration. But he wasn't stupid enough to challenge a moon-touched elder, even a dying one. "This isn't over," he snarled, gesturing for his warriors to follow him. "Magnus will hear about this, all of it." "I'm counting on it," Elena replied calmly. After they left, Elena swayed on her feet, and Arya rushed to support her. The display of power had clearly taken its toll. "Are you all right?" "I'll live. But that little demonstration used up most of my remaining strength." Elena's ancient eyes were sad. The moon-touched magic is fading from the world. Soon, there will be none of us left. Elena, help me with Kieran. We have work to do, and not much time. They spent the next several hours fighting for Kieran's life. Elena used her remaining magic to help purge the silver from his system, while Arya provided physical support, monitoring his vital signs, changing bandages, forcing healing potions down his throat when he was conscious enough to swallow. It was touch and go for most of the night, but gradually, his natural healing began to take over. The wounds started closing, his breathing steadied, and some color returned to his pale face. As dawn broke over the battlefield, Kieran's eyes finally opened. Arya? His voice was weak but aware. I'm here. She gripped his hand tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. You're going to be okay. The pack? We held them off. Marcus retreated when Elena showed him what a moon-touched elder could do. Kieran's eyes widened. Elena's moon-touched? I thought they were all dead. So did everyone else, Elena said dryly from her chair beside the bed. Sometimes it pays to let people believe in myths. Over the next few days, as Kieran recovered and the pack counted their losses, the full scope of what had happened became clear. Magnus had sent 40 of his best warriors, expecting to crush the rogue pack with overwhelming force. Instead, they'd been fought to a standstill and forced to retreat. The victory came at a cost. 3 defenders had been killed, and many more were wounded. But they had proven something important. The Blackthorn pack wasn't invincible. Word of this will spread, Kane said during a pack meeting a week later. Every rogue pack in North America will hear how we stood up to Magnus and live to tell about it. Which means they'll be more likely to listen when we propose our alliance, Kieran added. He was still weak from his injuries, but his determination was stronger than ever. The gathering is still 3 weeks away, Elena pointed out. Magnus will use that time to plan his response. He won't make the same mistakes twice. Then we'd better make sure we're ready for whatever he throws at us next, Arya said firmly. As the meeting broke up, Kieran pulled her aside. There's something I need to tell you, he said quietly. Something I realized while I was unconscious. What? I love you more than my own life. I always have, from the moment I first saw you in that storm. But I also love what we're trying to build here. This dream of a better world for all of us. Arya felt a chill of premonition. Kieran, what are you saying? I'm saying that if it comes down to a choice between saving me and saving the Alliance, you need to choose the Alliance. No. The word came out sharp and immediate. Don't you dare ask me to make that choice. Arya, no, Kieran. I won't survive losing you, and this Alliance won't succeed without you leading it. We're stronger together, remember? That's the whole point of what we're fighting for. He cupped her face in his hands, his golden eyes intense. Promise me something. What? Promise me that if the worst happens, you'll keep fighting. That you'll help Elena and Kane and the others build the world we've dreamed of. Arya wanted to refuse, to tell him that she couldn't imagine a future without him in it. But she could see how important this was to him, how much he needed to know that their cause would survive even if he didn't. I promise, she whispered, but you have to promise me something too. Anything. Promise me you'll fight to come home to me. No matter what happens, no matter how dark things get, you'll remember that I'm waiting for you. I promise. He kissed her softly, and she could taste the salt of tears on his lips. I love you, Arya. Whatever happens next, never doubt that. I love you too. Always. As they held each other in the fading light, both of them knew that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The gathering would either unite the rogue packs in common cause, or it would expose them to Magnus's vengeance. But whatever came next, they would face it together. And maybe, just maybe, they would succeed in changing the world. Chapter 8. The Gathering of Outcasts. The neutral meeting ground was a natural amphitheater carved into the Canadian mountains, a circle of stone that had been used for gatherings since before recorded history. Ancient symbols were carved into the rock faces, worn smooth by centuries of wind and weather, but still visible to those who knew how to look. Arya stood at the edge of the circle, watching as representatives from nearly 24 rogue packs filed into the space. They came in all shapes and sizes. Grizzled veterans like Kane, young rebels fleeing traditional pack structures, families seeking safety for their children, lone wolves who'd never belonged anywhere. Nervous? Kieran asked, joining her at the overlook. Terrified, she admitted. What if they don't listen? What if this was all for nothing? Then we try again. And again, until someone hears us. His hand found hers, warm and steady. But I don't think that's going to happen. Look at them, Arya. These people are hungry for change. He was right. Even from a distance, she could see the hope in their faces, the way they looked at Kieran with a mixture of curiosity and expectation. Word of his defection from the Blackthorn Pack had spread throughout the rogue community, along with stories of the battle at Haven. It's time, Elena said, approaching them with her walking stick. The old woman had insisted on making the journey despite her weakened condition, claiming that the gathering needed the legitimacy her presence would provide. They made their way down to the amphitheater floor, where a space had been cleared in the center for speakers. Arya took her place among the other pack representatives, while Kieran moved to the center of the circle. For a moment, he just stood there, letting the assembled rogues get a good look at him. When he finally spoke, his voice carried clearly in the mountain air. My name is Kieran Blackthorn, he began. Son of Alpha Magnus, heir to the largest pack in North America. 3 months ago, I walked away from all of that. I gave up power, privilege, and everything I'd ever known, because I realized that strength without compassion is just another form of weakness. A murmur went through the crowd, some approving, others skeptical. I stand before you today not as the heir to a throne, but as a fellow outcast, a rogue, just like all of you, because I believe that rogues aren't the problem with shifter society. We're the solution. Pretty words, called out a voice from the crowd. But what makes you think we should trust a Blackthorn? Kieran had expected this challenge, because I've seen both sides of our world. I know what traditional pack structure creates: fear, oppression, endless cycles of violence. But I've also seen what's possible when shifters choose cooperation over domination. He gestured toward Kane and the other Haven Pack members. 3 weeks ago, 40 of my father's best warriors attacked the pack that gave me sanctuary. They expected an easy victory over a handful of rogues. Instead, they were fought to a standstill and forced to retreat. Not because the rogues were stronger, but because they were united. This got more reaction from the crowd. The story of Haven's victory had become legend among the rogue community. That's what I'm proposing today, Kieran continued. Not just an alliance between our packs, but a new way of thinking about what it means to be shifters. A society based on merit instead of birthright, on cooperation instead of conquest, on protecting the weak instead of exploiting them. And how exactly would this society work? Asked a middle-aged woman with graying hair. Who leads? Who makes the decisions? Kieran smiled. We all do. Instead of a single alpha ruling through force, each pack would send representatives to a council. Decisions would be made by consensus, with the good of all packs taking priority over individual ambitions. That's chaos, protested a younger man. Without strong leadership, we'll tear ourselves apart. Will we? Or will we finally learn to solve problems through discussion instead of violence? The debate that followed was heated but civil. Representatives voiced concerns about everything from territorial disputes to resource allocation to defense against traditional packs. But through it all, Arya could see that the core idea was taking hold. These people were tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being treated as second-class citizens in their own world. Kieran was offering them something they'd never had before: hope. The discussion went on for hours, with Kieran fielding questions and objections with patience and wisdom. Finally, Elena rose from her seat, and the entire gathering fell silent out of respect for her age and status. "I have lived for nearly a century," she said, her voice carrying despite her frail appearance. "I have seen the rise and fall of dozens of packs, witnessed countless wars fought over pride and territory, and I can tell you that what young Kieran proposes is not just possible. It's necessary." She gestured around the circle. "Look at yourselves. Outcasts, they call you. Rogues without honor or purpose. But I see something different. I see the future of our people. I see shifters who chose exile over complicity, who value conscience over convenience." Her ancient eyes found Kieran in the crowd. This young man gave up everything for his principles. He faced his father's hunters and survived. He protected those who couldn't protect themselves. If that's not the mark of a true alpha, I don't know what is. "You're talking about revolution," said the gray-haired woman. "I'm talking about evolution," Elena replied. "About becoming what we were always meant to be. Protectors, not predators. Guardians, not conquerors." When she sat down, the silence stretched for several long moments. Then, one by one, pack representatives began to stand. "Yellowstone Pack stands with the Alliance," declared a man with silver streaks in his dark hair. "Pacific Northwest Pack agrees," added a woman with intricate tattoos covering her arms. "Desert Pack is in," said another voice. Within minutes, every pack present had pledged their support. The alliance was official. As cheers erupted around the amphitheater, Arya felt tears streaming down her face. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd actually done it. But even as she celebrated, a part of her mind remained focused on what came next. Magnus wouldn't take this challenge lying down. The real test of their alliance was still to come. Later that evening, as the various packs began making plans for the journey home, Kieran found Arya sitting alone on a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley. "Penny, for your thoughts," he said, settling beside her. "I was thinking about what happens now. Magnus is going to see this alliance as a direct threat to his authority. He should, because that's exactly what it is." Kieran's expression was grim but determined. "We've just declared war on everything he represents. Are you ready for that? Really ready?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkening sky. 3 months ago, I would have said no. I believed in the old ways, in the necessity of strong leadership and clear hierarchies. But then I met you, and everything changed. How? You showed me what real strength looks like. Not the kind that comes from fear or intimidation, but the kind that comes from choosing to do the right thing even when it's difficult, even when it costs you everything. He turned to face her, his golden eyes intense. "I'm ready, Arya. For war, if that's what it takes. For whatever comes next. Because I finally understand what I'm fighting for." "What's that?" "A world where our children, shifter and human alike, can grow up without fear. A world where love isn't limited by species or tradition. A world where people like you and me can build something beautiful together." Arya leaned into his warmth, feeling the truth of his words resonate in her bones. They were about to face the greatest challenge of their lives, but they would face it together. And maybe, just maybe, they would win. Chapter 9. The Price of Rebellion. The attack came 2 days after they returned to Haven. This time, there was no warning, no scouts reporting movement on the horizon. Magnus had learned from his previous defeat. Instead of sending a conventional force, he dispatched assassins. Arya woke to the sound of Kieran's voice, urgent and commanding. "Everyone up! We're under attack!" She rolled out of bed, instantly alert, grabbing the weapons they kept beside their bed. Through the window, she could see shadows moving between the cabins, shifters in wolf form, moving with the deadly grace of trained killers. "How many?" she asked, checking her pistol. Kane had insisted she learn to use firearms after the last attack. "Unknown. They're hitting multiple targets simultaneously." Kieran was already shifting, his human form blurring and reshaping. "Stay with Elena and the others. Protect the non-combatants." Before she could argue, he was gone, bounding through the cabin door as a massive black wolf. Arya didn't waste time worrying about him. She'd learned to trust in his abilities as a fighter. Instead, she made her way to the medical cabin where Elena and several other pack members were gathering the wounded from the initial assault. "How bad is it?" she asked, taking a position by the window with her rifle. "Bad," Elena replied grimly. "These aren't ordinary raiders. They're targeting specific individuals, pack leaders, anyone who spoke in favor of the Alliance." A chill ran down Arya's spine. "They're trying to decapitate the Resistance." "Exactly. Without leadership, the Alliance will crumble before it's truly begun." The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. These assassins were good, better than the warriors Magnus had sent before. They moved like ghosts, striking hard and fast before disappearing back into the shadows. Arya caught glimpses of Kieran through the window, coordinating the defense with Kane and the other fighters. Even in the chaos of battle, his tactical mind was evident, positioning defenders to protect vital areas, cutting off escape routes, turning the assassin's own tactics against them. Then she saw him, Marcus, moving through the combat zone with deadly purpose, heading straight for the medical cabin. "He's coming," she warned Elena, raising her rifle. "Let him come," the old woman replied, and there was steel in her voice. "I'm not as weak as I was before." The door exploded inward, and Marcus stood framed in the opening, his human form spattered with blood that wasn't his own. "Hello again, human," he said conversationally. "Miss me?" Arya fired without hesitation, but Marcus was already moving, the bullet passing harmlessly through the space where he'd been standing. He covered the distance between them in 2 strides, knocking the rifle from her hands with casual ease. Now, he tisked. "That's no way to greet an old friend." "You're no friend of mine." "True. But I am your executioner." His hand closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground. "Magnus decided that your mate needs to learn the consequences of defying pack authority." Arya clawed at his grip, but it was like trying to move iron. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision as her air supply was cut off. Then Elena was there, her frail hands glowing with inner light. "Release her," the old woman commanded, and power rolled through her voice like thunder. Marcus turned, his grip on Arya loosening slightly. "Another moon-touched parlor trick? I'm not as easily impressed this time, Elder." "Then you're a fool," Elena replied, and unleashed the full force of her remaining power. The blast of energy sent Marcus flying across the cabin, his body slamming into the far wall with bone-crushing force. But instead of staying down, he rolled to his feet with a laugh. "Is that all? I was expecting more from the last of the moon-touched." Elena swayed, her face pale with exhaustion. The display had used up the last of her strength, and they all knew it. "Run," she whispered to Arya. "Find Kieran. I'll hold him as long as I can." "I'm not leaving you. You have to. The Alliance needs you both. Before Arya could protest further, Marcus was on the move again. But this time his target wasn't her. It was Elena. "Old woman, you've been a thorn in my side for too long," he snarled, raising clawed hands to strike. Elena stood her ground, meeting his attack with courage if not strength. "I regret nothing," she said clearly. "The Alliance will survive. The future belongs to people like Kieran and Arya." Marcus's claws descended, and Arya screamed, but the killing blow never landed. Kieran burst through the window in a shower of glass and fury, tackling Marcus to the ground in a tangle of muscle and rage. The two alphas fought with savage intensity, rolling across the cabin floor, destroying furniture and medical supplies in their wake. Kieran was younger and faster, but Marcus had decades of experience and a complete lack of moral restraints. Blood flowed freely from wounds on both fighters as they battled for dominance. Arya watched in horror, wanting to help but knowing that any interference could prove fatal for Kieran. Finally, Kieran managed to get his jaws around Marcus's throat, pinning the older alpha in place. For a moment, the cabin was silent except for their harsh breathing. "Yield," Kieran growled, his voice distorted by his shifted form. "Never," Marcus spat. "Kill me, boy. Prove you're as ruthless as your father." "I'm not my father," Kieran replied, and Arya could hear the pain in his voice. "I don't kill unnecessarily." "Then you're weak, and weakness gets people killed." To prove his point, Marcus twisted in Kieran's grip, pulling a silver knife from his belt and driving it toward Elena's heart. Kieran's choice was instantaneous. He released Marcus and threw himself between the blade and the old woman, taking the silver knife in his own chest. The scream that tore from Arya's throat was pure anguish. She watched Kieran collapse, silver spreading through his system like poison, and something inside her broke. Marcus stood over Kieran's convulsing form, smiling with satisfaction. There's the son Magnus raised, foolish and sentimental to the end. That's when Arya stopped thinking and started moving. She dove for the rifle Marcus had knocked from her hands, rolled to her feet, and put 3 bullets center mass before the alpha could react. Marcus looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest with something like surprise. "A human," he said wonderingly. "Killed by a human." Then he toppled backward and was still. Arya didn't spare him another glance. She was already kneeling beside Kieran, pressing her hands against the silver wound, trying to stop the bleeding. "Don't you dare leave me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you dare!" Elena struggled to Kieran's side, her ancient hands shaking as she examined the wound. The silver is spreading too fast. His system can't fight it off. "Then do something. Use your magic." "I have none left. That last attack drained everything I had." Arya looked around desperately. But the other pack members were either unconscious or dealing with their own injuries. She was alone with a dying mate and no way to save him. That's when she remembered something Elena had told her weeks ago during one of their conversations about shifter lore. "The mating bond," she said suddenly. "You said it was more than just emotional, that it created a physical connection between mates." Elena's eyes widened with understanding. "You want to share his burden. Split the poison between you." "Can it be done?" "Theoretically. But Arya, you're human." "What silver poisoning would do to you?" "I don't care." Arya's voice was fierce with determination. "Tell me how." Elena hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Place your hands over his heart. Open your mind to the bond between you. Will yourself to take part of his pain." Arya did as instructed, closing her eyes and reaching out with senses she was only beginning to understand. She could feel the mating bond, a golden thread connecting her soul to Kieran's, and through it, she could sense his agony. Without hesitation, she opened herself to it, pulling the poison into her own system. The pain hit her like a physical blow. Fire racing through her veins, her nervous system screaming in protest. But she held on, taking as much of the burden as her human body could bear. She felt Kieran's breathing steady, his heartbeat growing stronger. The gambit was working. By sharing the poison between them, they were both surviving what would have killed either one alone. When she finally opened her eyes, Kieran was looking at her with a mixture of love and terror. "You could have died," he whispered. "So could you." She helped him sit up, noting with relief that his wounds were already beginning to heal. "We're stronger together, remember?" "Always," he agreed, pulling her into his arms. As dawn broke over the battlefield, they counted the cost of the night's battle. 5 pack members were dead, including 2 of the Alliance's most vocal supporters. But they had also struck a blow against Magnus. Marcus was dead, and with him went the Blackthorn Pack's most experienced war leader. "It's not over," Kane said as they gathered to plan their next move. "Magnus will come himself next time." "Let him come," Kieran replied, his arm around Arya's waist. "We'll be ready." But privately, Arya wondered if they would be. The alliance was still fragile, held together more by hope than by any real strength. And Magnus Blackthorn was the most powerful alpha in North America. Still, as she looked around at the faces of their allies, battered but unbroken, scared but determined, she felt a spark of hope. They had something Magnus didn't understand, the power of people fighting for a cause greater than themselves. And maybe that would be enough. Chapter 10. The Final Reckoning. Magnus Blackthorn arrived at Haven 3 days later. He came alone. No army, no war party, just a single gray wolf padding through the forest with the casual confidence of a predator who had never known defeat. Arya watched from the main cabin's window as he shifted to human form at the edge of the clearing. Even at a distance, the family resemblance to Kieran was unmistakable. The same strong features, the same commanding presence. But where Kieran's eyes held warmth and compassion, Magnus's were cold as winter ice. "He's here," she said quietly. Kieran moved to stand beside her, his hand finding hers. "I know. I can smell him." "Shouldn't there be more of them? An army?" "This is more insulting than an army," Elena said from her chair by the fire. "He's saying we're so little threat that he can handle us personally." Kane and the other pack leaders had gathered in the main cabin for what they all knew would be the final confrontation. The Alliance representatives who'd returned to their own territories after the gathering had been contacted, but there was no time for reinforcements to arrive. "What's the plan?" asked David, checking his weapons. "We talk first," Kieran said firmly. "This is between him and me. Maybe we can settle it without more bloodshed." "You really think he came here to negotiate?" Kane's tone was skeptical. "No. But I have to try." Magnus's voice carried clearly across the clearing, amplified by Alpha Command. "Kieran, come out, boy. It's time we had a conversation." "Remember," Elena said as Kieran headed for the door, "he's not just your father anymore. He's the enemy of everything we're trying to build." "I know," Kieran replied quietly. "That doesn't make this easier." Arya started to follow him, but he stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "Stay inside, please. If things go badly, we face it together." She looked up into his golden eyes, seeing the fear and love warring there. "That's what mates do." After a moment, he nodded. They walked out into the clearing together, hand in hand, to face the most powerful alpha in North America. Magnus was waiting for them in the center of the open space, dressed in simple black clothing that somehow made him more intimidating rather than less. He looked older than Arya had expected, with silver streaking his dark hair and lines of harsh experience carved into his face. "Father?" Kieran said formally. "Kieran." Magnus's gaze moved to Arya, and she fought not to flinch under the weight of his attention. And this must be the human who's caused so much trouble. Her name is Arya, Kieran said, his voice carrying a warning. She's my mate. So I've heard. Magnus circled them slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. Do you have any idea how much embarrassment you've caused me, boy? How many enemies are circling now that they sense weakness in the Blackthorn pack? I'm sorry you see my conscience as weakness. Your conscience? Magnus laughed harshly. Is that what you call this romantic nonsense? You threw away your birthright, your pack, your future? For what? A human who'll be dead in a few decades anyway? For love, Kieran said simply. For the chance to build something better than what you've created. Better? Magnus's voice rose with genuine anger. I built the most powerful pack in North America. I created an empire that spans half a continent. And you want to throw it all away for some idealistic fantasy about equality and cooperation? Yes, Kieran replied without hesitation, because an empire built on fear and oppression isn't worth preserving. Magnus was silent for a long moment, studying his son with something that might have been disappointment, or might have been grief. I had such hopes for you, he said finally. You were supposed to be my greatest achievement. Stronger than me, smarter than me, capable of taking the pack to heights I could never reach. I can still do that, just not the way you imagined. By betraying everything I taught you? By consorting with rogues and humans? By undermining the natural order? By choosing compassion over cruelty? By protecting the innocent instead of exploiting them? Magnus shook his head sadly. You sound like your mother. The words hit Kieran like a physical blow. Arya felt him tense beside her, his breathing growing shallow. Don't, he said quietly. Don't you dare bring her into this. Why not? She had the same romantic ideals, the same naive belief that the world could be changed through love and understanding. Magnus's smile was cruel. And look how that ended for her. She died protecting innocence from your enemies. She died a hero. She died because she was weak, because she let emotion cloud her judgment. Magnus stepped closer, his presence radiating menace. Just like you're doing now. I'm nothing like you, Kieran snarled, his control finally cracking. No? Then prove it. Challenge me. Winner takes all. Leadership of the pack, control of the alliance, the life of your precious human mate. Arya's blood ran cold. This was what Magnus had come for. Not negotiation, not reconciliation, but single combat with his son. And if I refuse? Kieran asked. Then I kill everyone here, starting with her. Magnus's gaze fixed on Arya with predatory hunger. Your choice, boy. Face me like an alpha, or watch everyone you care about die. Kieran was quiet for a long moment, and Arya could see him wrestling with the decision. She wanted to tell him not to do it, to find another way, but she knew there wasn't one. Magnus had backed them into a corner where violence was the only option. I accept, Kieran said finally. But when I win, you leave our territory and never return. The alliance stands, and all your claims on my loyalty are forfeit. When you win? Magnus laughed. Boy, I was killing enemies before you learned to walk. This will be over quickly. Both men began to strip off their clothes, preparing for the shift. Arya moved back to the edge of the clearing, her heart hammering with terror and pride in equal measure. He can win, Elena said quietly, appearing beside her. Kieran has advantages his father doesn't. Youth, speed, and something to fight for beyond his own ego. But what if he doesn't? Arya whispered. Then we hope his sacrifice means something. The two wolves that faced each other in the clearing were studies in contrast. Magnus was larger and more heavily muscled, his gray coat marked with battle scars that spoke of decades of violence. But Kieran moved with fluid grace, his black fur gleaming like polished obsidian. They circled each other warily, testing for weaknesses. Magnus was the first to attack, lunging forward with the crushing force of a landslide. But Kieran was ready, twisting aside and raking his claws across his father's flank. First blood to the challenger. Magnus roared with rage and pain, spinning to face his son with murder in his eyes. The next exchange was even more violent, teeth and claws flashing in the sunlight, both wolves dealing and receiving punishment with savage intensity. But as the fight continued, Arya began to see the difference Elena had mentioned. Magnus fought with the brutal efficiency of a killer, but there was something mechanical about it, as if he was going through the motions of combat without real passion. Kieran, on the other hand, fought like someone protecting everything he loved. Every move was calculated not just to defeat his opponent, but to survive so he could return to the people counting on him. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Both wolves were bleeding from multiple wounds, their breathing harsh and labored. But gradually, Magnus's superior size and experience began to tell. A particularly vicious exchange left Kieran sprawled on the ground, his father's jaws inches from his throat. "Yield," Magnus growled, his voice distorted by his shifted form. "Acknowledge my dominance, and I'll make your death quick." Instead of surrendering, Kieran looked across the clearing to where Arya stood watching. Their eyes met, and she saw something pass between them, a communication deeper than words, a reaffirmation of the bond that had brought them together. "I yield to no one," Kieran said clearly, "especially not to a tyrant who calls cruelty strength." With a surge of desperate energy, he rolled away from Magnus's killing bite and regained his feet. The move caught the older alpha off guard, and Kieran used the moment to land a devastating blow across his father's throat. Magnus staggered, blood flowing freely from the wound. For the first time since the fight began, he looked uncertain. "This ends now," Kieran said, pressing his advantage. "Surrender, and I'll let you live in exile. Continue fighting, and I'll do what you never could. I'll show mercy to a defeated enemy." For a moment, Magnus seemed to consider the offer. Then his expression hardened with familiar cruelty. "I'd rather die than live in a world shaped by your weakness," he snarled, and lunged forward in a final, desperate attack. Kieran met him halfway, and the two wolves collided with bone-crushing force. When they separated, only one was still standing. Magnus lay motionless in the dirt, his neck bent at an unnatural angle. The most powerful alpha in North America was dead, killed by his own son in defense of a better world. Kieran shifted back to human form and walked slowly to where Arya waited. She could see the grief in his eyes, the pain of what he'd been forced to do. "I'm sorry," she whispered, pulling him into her arms. "So am I," he replied quietly. But it was necessary. He would never have stopped otherwise. As word of Magnus's death spread, pack representatives began arriving at Haven. Some came to pledge loyalty to the new alpha, others to test his resolve, still others to offer alliance with the growing coalition of reform-minded packs. Over the following weeks, it became clear that Kieran's victory had done more than just remove a single enemy. It had proven that the old ways could be challenged, that change was not just possible, but inevitable. The alliance grew stronger with each passing day, as more and more packs chose cooperation over conflict, compassion over cruelty. Chapter 11. New Beginnings. 1 year later, Arya stood on the balcony of their new home, watching the sun set over the valley that had become the heart of the Alliance territory. Below, she could see shifters and humans working together to build something unprecedented, a community where both species could thrive as equals. "Penny for your thoughts," Kieran said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. just thinking about how much has changed. She leaned back against his solid warmth, marveling at how safe and loved she felt in his embrace. A year ago, I was running for my life from human monsters. Now I'm helping to build a new world. Any regrets? Not a single one. She turned in his arms to face him, seeing the contentment in his golden eyes. What about you? Do you ever miss the old life? How can I miss something that was never really mine? Kieran's hand moved to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with infinite tenderness. I was living someone else's dream, following someone else's rules. This, us, the Alliance, what we're building here, this is the first time my life has truly belonged to me. A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched the last light fade from the sky. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the evening community gathering, laughter, conversation, children playing. It was a sound neither of them had ever thought they'd hear in the shifter world. The council meeting went well today, Kieran said eventually. Oh? What did I miss while I was in town with the medical supply run? 3 more packs have requested membership. 1 from Canada, 2 from the Southwestern Territories. His smile was proud but tired. Elena thinks we'll have over 50 member packs by the end of the year. Arya felt a surge of amazement. When they'd first proposed the alliance, they'd hoped for maybe a dozen packs. The reality had exceeded their wildest dreams. And the human integration program? Better than expected. Dr. Martinez says the cross-species medical exchange is already saving lives on both sides. Human doctors are learning about shifter healing techniques, while our healers are gaining access to advanced surgical procedures. It had been Arya's idea to establish formal partnerships between human and shifter communities. The program was still small and carefully managed, but the results were promising. Slowly, carefully, they were proving that the 2 species could coexist peacefully. There's something else, Kieran said, and there was something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. What? Instead of answering, he dropped to one knee on the balcony, pulling a small box from his pocket. Arya's breath caught. Kieran. I know we're already mated in the eyes of shifter law, he said, opening the box to reveal a simple but beautiful ring. But I want to marry you in the human tradition too. I want to make promises to you in front of both our peoples, to show the world that love doesn't recognize the boundaries we create. Tears blurred her vision as she looked down at him. This man who'd given up everything for her, who'd fought to create a better world for both their species. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, of course, yes! He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly with emotion, then stood to kiss her with a passion that still made her knees weak after all this time. I love you, he murmured against her lips. My mate, my heart, my salvation. I love you too. Always. As they held each other on the balcony, watching stars appear in the darkening sky, Arya thought about the journey that had brought them here. The terror, the pain, the moments when hope had seemed impossible. All of it had led to this perfect moment of peace and love and infinite possibility. What are you thinking about now? Kieran asked, sensing her mood. Everything. The storm that brought us together, the battles we fought, the world we're building. She looked up at him, seeing their future reflected in his eyes. I was thinking that fairy tales do come true sometimes. They just don't look anything like we expect them to. And what does our fairy tale look like? Arya smiled, gesturing toward the valley below where their people, shifter and human alike, were creating something beautiful and unprecedented. Like this. Like love conquering fear. Like hope triumphing over hatred. Like 2 broken people becoming whole together and then helping others heal. I like our version better than the traditional ones, Kieran said softly. Me too. No princesses in towers or knights in shining armor. Just real people making real choices and fighting for what matters. Speaking of fighting for what matters, Kieran said with a grin, Elena wants to know when we're going to provide her with cubs to spoil. Arya laughed, the sound bright and happy in the mountain air. Tell Elena she'll have to be patient a little longer. We have a world to build first. And after? After, we'll fill this house with the sound of children's laughter. Human and shifter children who grow up knowing that love comes in many forms, that strength isn't about dominance, and that the best way to honor your gifts is to use them in service of others. Kieran's arms tightened around her. I can't wait to see the world through their eyes. Neither can I. As they stood together in the starlight, Arya felt the truth of their bond singing in her blood, not just the mystical connection of mates, but the deeper union of two souls who'd found their perfect complement. They'd survived the storm that brought them together, fought the battles that tested them, and emerged stronger than either could have been alone. And this was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that their vision of the future was worth fighting for. There would be political complications, resistance from traditional packs, the ongoing work of building trust between species that had viewed each other with suspicion for millennia. But tonight, they had peace. They had love. They had hope. And for two people who'd once had nothing but the clothes on their backs and the desperate need to survive, that was everything. Come to bed, Kieran said softly, taking her hand. In a minute. Arya took one last look at the valley below, at the lights of their community twinkling like earthbound stars. I just want to remember this moment, this feeling of having everything we ever wanted. We'll have many more moments like this, Kieran promised. A lifetime of them. I know, but this is the first time I've felt truly free. Free from the past, free from fear, free to choose our own destiny. Then let's go choose it together. Hand in hand, they walked inside, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Behind them, the valley settled into peaceful sleep, a testament to what was possible when love refused to bow to fear, when hope proved stronger than hatred, when two hearts beat as one in service of a dream that was bigger than both of them. The storm that had brought them together was long past, but the love it had awakened would last forever. A beacon of light in a world that was finally learning to choose compassion over cruelty, unity over division, love over everything else. And in the end, that was the greatest magic of all.